2020. The first case on the agenda is RPC. It's an economic unit. It's different than what's listed on the agenda, but economic unit 170040H, and the property is located at 1533 Clarendon Boulevard. Ms. Suzanne Ross is going to speak on behalf of the appellant. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Centro Arlington. It's a 6-story mixed-use building located at 950 South George Mason Drive in Barcroft area submarket. There are 366 units and 71,605 square feet of commercial space. The property just opened in 2019 and began leasing the apartments in September, and the commercial space began leasing in October of 2019. Therefore, there's no year-end income expense information available. If you turn to page 6, you'll see a side-by-side. I'm sorry?
Thank you for your patience.
Can you hear me okay?
You are now joining.
Good.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. This meeting is
You can hear me. Okay, I should have feedback again. If you turn to page 6, you'll Sorry, I can hear feedback again. You can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. If you turn to page 6, you'll see a side-by-side presentation of our analysis and the counties. The property itself is offering concessions of 2 months free rent on all new rents and any new renewals through at least the end of 2020. The concessions are listed on the subject's website, and as well as if you drive by the building, you'll see it advertised on the building itself. So the gross potential income is calculated by using the average rents per unit and deducting the 2 months free rent, which came out to $8,392,936 or $1,911 per unit per month. The county has overstated the gross potential income at $2,195 per unit per month, or $9,640,140. All of the other assumptions in our presentation come directly from the Arlington County's 2020 guidelines. Since there's no income and expense available, we used a 5% vacancy, $7,111 per unit in expenses, and a 5.4% cap rate. For some reason, the county underestimated the expenses at $7,006 per unit. Preliminary estimate of value is $99,456,721. So what we did was we made a deduction below the line to account for lease up for 18 months. As previously mentioned, the property was very, very early into the initial lease-up process as of the valuation date, and the owners had indicated they will not reach full stabilization for at least 18 to 24 months. So we made a deduction of $12,589,404, which was calculated based on 18 months of the gross potential income, so the $8.3 million plus half of $8.3 million. The county did make a deduction also for lease up. However, they only accounted for 1 year, which isn't nearly adequate consideration considering the expected stabilization date of the property. As far as the commercial space, which is right below that.
Sorry, Ms. Ross, can I just interrupt 1 second? Because I'm getting texts from a couple of members. I actually called the other case and there's just confusion. Obviously, I think everybody has clicked over, but you are actually presenting the second case on the agenda, and so I just want to make sure everybody is on the same page.
So that's not the case.
George Mason Drive, right?
Yeah, this is 940 South George Mason Drive. I actually called the 1533 Clarendon Boulevard, which is why there's some confusion. I just want to make sure everybody's on the case that you're discussing. So
I apologize for that.
That's okay. So, in fairness, then if you need a few more minutes just to kind of, restate what you're saying, I just want to make sure everybody's singing from the same sheet here.
Okay.
Okay, so are all the board members okay and on the correct case? Okay. There you go. Thank you. All right, Ms. Ross, you can go ahead. And like I said, if you need to repeat some of the information, please feel free to.
Okay, I guess what we'll go back to is page 6, just to show the side-by-side presentation.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, the apartment portion of the property, as I mentioned, is offering concessions of 2 months free rent on all new rents, as well as any renewals through the end of 2020. The concessions, as I mentioned, are listed on the subject's website and are also advertised on the side of the building if you drive by. The gross potential income in our analysis was calculated by using the average rents per unit that they've already rented, minus 2 months free rent for a total of $8,392,936. The county has overestimated the gross potential at $9,640,140. All the other assumptions are based on the county's 2020 guidelines, which is a 5% vacancy, 7,111 per unit expense rate, and a 5.4% cap rate. For some reason, again, the county underestimated the expenses at 7,006 per unit. Our preliminary estimate of value is $99,456,720. From that, we made a below-the-line lease-up deduction for 18 months. As previously mentioned, the property is very early into the initial lease-up process as of valuation date, and the owners had indicated that will not reach full stabilization for at least 18 to 24 months. So we made a deduction of $12,589,400, which was calculated based on 18 months of the gross potential income. The county did also make a deduction, however, for only 1 year, which doesn't give nearly adequate consideration to the expected stabilization date for the property. As far as the commercial space, which is right below the multifamily, the gross potential income comes directly from the rent roll, and we grossed up the vacant space at $21.50 a square foot, which was the most recent lease amount signed. All other assumptions, again, come from the 2020 Arlington guidelines, with a 3% vacancy, 13% expenses, and a 7% cap rate. This resulted in a preliminary value of $20,908,880. Again, we used an 18-month deduction of $2,601,532, which was based on the gross potential plus 6 months of the gross potential. This resulted in an estimated value for the commercial space of $18,307,350. So the total requested change to the assessment is $105,174,670. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chikas.
Good morning, board members. Good morning, Ms. Ross. So yeah, this is a bit unusual in that it's a true projection. This is something that has no history whatsoever. It just basically opened its doors in the fall of 2019. So I think, as Ms. Ross notes, this is pure projection on both the parts, the county and the appellant. Where we differ is a couple different areas. One, starting with the gross potential. We noted in the appellant's own packet, page 92 of 138, the owner's unit availability detail submission lists the building's total monthly potential. I don't believe that's confidential information, but at the same point, I'd just assume you all confirm that yourself. In fact, you'll see it in the comment section of our summary page, page 3. It lists a monthly gross potential income of just over $800,000, which, when you extrapolate out to the year, comes out to a gross potential for the property as apartment component that's well above what was projected by the county. We would note too that we did in fact give a full year's deduction, even though again this building was leasing up in the last 3 months of 2019. And by that same unit availability detail, I believe I counted 135 tenants out of 366, so approximately 37% of the building was already leased up as of January 1st. But again, the county gives a full 12-month deduction as a standard on all new multifamily properties during that lease-up period. Because it's an annual assessment, we do believe that a 18th month deduction is inappropriate, as it would essentially add on 6 months that is not being incurred by the property. This property will be looked at again January 1st, 2021, and everything that occurred in the calendar 2020 year will be looked at for that next year. Ms. Ross also made mention of what's going on currently, and that there's 2 months of free rent, which is being applied by the building. But to use their own words, as is indicated on page 63 of 138, that's currently being offered. So if this is current as of the submission of the packet as of April, that will be something that occurred after January 1st. So we don't believe that should be considered as well. It's essentially a bit akin to recognizing the effects of COVID in the current year. And so what they've done since January 1st should not necessarily be considered in the January 1st assessment. In regards to the rent roll for the retail component, we did request a more detailed rent roll analysis But to our own discredit, that was something we asked for late. That was just something I asked for on the 28th of July. The reason we asked is two reasons. If you notice, this is on page 93 of 138. The rent roll lists base rent only. So in other words, it doesn't list CAM or pass-throughs that are passed on from the owner to the retailer. And obviously that would be income that would be achievable by the property itself. And we also noted that the $21.50 per square foot rate that was being offered was quite low and is assuredly indicative of, again, either free rent or some sort of abated rent. That's, again, typical for a new property in its first year. But we don't believe that that's something that's going to carry on for the lease terms that were signed. So we don't believe that the retail rent that's being projected by the appellant is necessarily indicative of what's going to happen at the property. Again, using guidelines near across the board, we are at 5% vacancy on the component for multifamily, 3% vacancy on the retail side. We did underproject a bit on the per unit expense of the multifamily side, but that was unfortunately just a math error on our part, whereby we use the total operating expense of the entire property and then divided by the number of units, as opposed to just isolating the apartment component alone and then dividing by the number of units. But even still, I believe the guideline calls for $7,111 a unit. We're at $7,006. And again, this, as it's pure projection, we can state fairly positively that this operating expense isn't going to be incurred in this first year, because obviously there's a large section that's vacant. Given that we believe that we underprojected based off of the owner's own gross potential for the project, for at least the apartment component, and again, given that we believe that a 12-month deduction is appropriate in an annual 12-month assessment, we do believe that the county should be confirmed at $134,006,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
Same question for department and appellant. Department, retail only. What dollars per square foot for base rent did you insert to get your total number?
We recognized the larger tenant, I believe it's a Harris Teeter, because they took up so much of the space that was available. It's basically, rough count is almost 75% of that space. They got a bit lower per square foot rate. I'm not positive, I don't know if Irvin's online, if I'm able to express that rate, per square foot rate, but I can tell you that they received 1 per square foot rate. And then the other three the components received another base rate that was the same. Unfortunately, I'm just not sure I'm able to tell you, but I think it's in the packet. You can actually see that on page.
Well, yeah, I was looking, but I was so slowly scrolling down, I couldn't find it.
Yeah,
please
the
direct
packets.
But we can you can disclose what it says on the commercial sheet. I mean, that's just really our projections. It's not like actual numbers, because again, this is the first year lease stuff. So we looked at Harris Teeters in the area. I think we actually talked to Lori, because she does value the grocery stores, and so we looked at her analysis of all the Harris Teeters in the county, and we used $26 a square foot on this Harris Teeter based off of the market data.
This is on page 10 of 138. The other components received $30, which again is on the low end of our projections for the retail store.
Oh, wow. Commercials. Both exist. Okay, that tells me a lot. One quick question. You have disparate square footages for the retail space. Are you going to this year decide on what the total is for next year?
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we ask for the more detailed rent rolls in general, either through BOMA or whoever they use as far as measuring out that square footage. It tends to change a little bit if they sign new tenants in this time period, because of course with build out, they may change the exact square footage. But generally speaking, what we want to do is try to get the most information, current information as possible. So once we get that rent roll from the owner, we'll be able to adjust that for January 1st.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawson.
This is for the applicant. If I want to visit the retail, where do I park?
I'm not sure, sir. I can find out. Good point.
I know the answer to that. They have underground
there's parking
parking.
right off of George Mason.
It's not surface. That was the point of my question.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, other questions from board members? No?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Hoffman, go ahead.
For the appellant, I remember reading, like, I don't know, maybe it was
I'm sorry,
here.
I'm not hearing.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay. I remember reading about a Y Hotel operating in this building in like 2019, or maybe it was 2018. Is that still going on? Is there income related to the hotel that's not reflected in the rent roll? Do you have any idea?
No, sir. There's no hotel there.
Okay. I guess for the department, is there any, was that ever discussed or?
Yeah, to be fair, I won't put the onus all on Ms. Ross. I know the county saw that. Y Hotel had been operating in another Boston building, and I think they had made plans to take up a number of units. But I don't believe that the partnership was consummated. But again, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay,
We didn't account for it regardless.
I've been in that grocery store, the parking garage, and I saw signage and everything that said hotel entrance, hotel lobby, and it was pointing me in that direction. And I didn't go investigate or anything, but it looked like there was some hotel activity going on in that building. So we don't have any hotel income on the rent roll.
Exactly.
Been provided. Okay, but there may be some income just not being reported.
You're correct, Greg.
Again,
it does show on the website. On the website for Y Hotel, it shows Y Hotel Central Arlington. So, Greg, you are correct.
Okay, so I can book a room right now at the Y Hotel Arlington?
Looking at the website, you put in Y Hotel Central Arlington. It comes up 950 South George Mason Drive. Ask for your arrival date, your departure date.
Interesting.
All right, I guess I got a follow-up question for the appellant. Is there anything in the pro forma that you provided for the 2020 numbers that indicates any kind of income from Y Hotel or from a Y Hotel lease?
No, sir, but all of the units were accounted for. So if some of those units are being used as a hotel, they're accounted for on a yearly basis, not on a nightly basis, which right now, as we all know, hotels are not doing so well.
Okay.
Okay, any final questions, Mr. Penaranda or Ms. Hogan?
No.
Yeah, I had one for the appellant actually. Ms. Ross, by taking a reduction on income from the top, the 2-month concession, then you're taking the guideline vacancy of 5%, and then you're requesting 18-month deduction from the bottom. Don't you think that's excessive to calculate the value on this property?
No, I do not, because the property just started leasing up right a few months before the date of valuation. And those unit availability details that Chris mentioned was an optimistic projection. I knew that when you file a board hearing, you have to have the income and expense, so I had them provide what they had projected back in 2019, which obviously with COVID and everything did not occur.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, one more question for the appellant. Do you have any data? You didn't file last year when I was on the board. This would have been in 2018, but what was the final cost of the project to build?
I do not have that information. I can find out if you would like.
Yeah, if you could get that.
Sure.
Okay, with no further questions, then Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. So essentially, without hammering home that idea, the unit availability detail is actually dated as of January 1st, 2020. So we do believe that should be considered when looking at the January 1st, 2020 assessment. And not to jump on Mr. Lawson's point of underground parking, but it should be noted that there was no other revenue source projected by the county in regards to the parking income, miscellaneous income, utility reimbursement income, other income. So given that we underprojected based off the owner's own unit availability detail for the projection for the year, and based on a 1 year's lease up deduction, which is given across the board for all new projects, multifamily projects, we do believe that the county should be confirmed at $134,006,500. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, I just wanted to mention again that the subject just began leasing at the end of 2019. Again, the unit availability detail that Chris keeps mentioning was an optimistic projection. The actual rents in place should be considered, which we provided. Chris mentioned he underestimated the expenses. Yeah, we should go with the higher income. It doesn't seem quite fair to go with the higher income and the lesser expenses. This is a perfect candidate for using their guidelines because there's no income and expense available. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, let me share my thought, and I guess I'll run it up the flagpole and see if anyone salutes. And I'd also like to ask a couple of my colleagues if they can remember from the past. What I thought in reviewing all of this is that I do think that the strongest point that's made by the applicant is the time for lease up. And so what I did is looked at 18 months lease up for the commercial. And I'll share, I mean, this commercial looks pretty tough to me. When I did Pentagon Row, you know, the applicant fought with Chris Zimmerman almost to the death in order to have some surface parking. And when you put, you know, somebody's going shopping and you tell them they got to go into an underground garage, it's just not as easy. And so I looked at a 18-month lease up, and then on the residential, I was thinking a more appropriate figure might be 15. And so I tinkered with the figures. I came up with 136, 623, 300. And I guess my question for my colleagues is, before coronavirus, weren't we going beyond a year for lease up for new projects? That's my recollection, but I could be erroneous in this.
Mr. Hoffman?
Well, I think one of the issues with lease up is when you have a hotel operating, you have to commit to give them a certain number of rooms for a certain amount of time, and you can't lease those during that period. That's the deal with Y Hotel. It provides you income when you have a lot of units, like 366 units. You'll take 100 or 150 of them, and you would say for 18 months, you can book these as hotel rooms and we won't lease them. You get the remaining units all leased up and stabilized, and then you release the hotel back to the apartment building. So, I mean, that's a strategic plan that they implemented. I don't think it reduces the value of the property at all. I mean, the big thing that jumps out at me is the county's about $300,000 a unit on the apartments, and 300 a square foot for retail, and that includes a fully built 25-year or whatever long-term lease they have with Harris Teeter. I think that's probably on the low end as far as cost. So you couldn't replace this for that amount anywhere in the county. So I'm good with the county's assessment.
Okay, other comments? Mr. Matzkin?
A quick response on the lease up of the apartments. Apartments are doing, no, I'm never mind. I've got conflicting notions. So let me go to the retail. I thought I saw a big hole in the income, in the disparate projections for retail income. And once I heard the supposed base rents per square foot, I realized that no, they're very forgiving to the appellant. And I certainly don't think the department overprojected the income from the retail by any stretch. And I have personal, professional insights to the retail there. So I'm way more than comfortable on that part.
Okay, agreed. Mr. Penaranda. Did you have something?
No, I'm okay with the assessment the way it is. I think the department did what it normally does, especially on projects that are new like these. You know, you don't necessarily have the whole income for the whole year. So you are going to use guidelines, and we're going to use numbers that are appropriate as far as the rents. And I don't see anything, you know, excessive on that. And, you know, by taking the 2 months concession from the top, to me, it's incorrect. The county's already given the allowance of 12 months rent. You know, all the numbers to me fall in line, so I'm okay with it.
Okay. Mr. Lawson, did you have a final comment?
Yeah, my final comment is I wonder if that hotel is in compliance with zoning.
Okay, that's for another committee.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Yates or Ms. Hogan, any final?
No, I'm fine with the county.
Mr. Metzgen.
I'm sorry, just one quick thing. As of January 1st, as we heard, more than a third of the apartments were already leased up. Seems to be another, does that mean, and so therefore the appellant's asking for an 18-month lease up for 3/4 of 2/3 of the apartment building? That seems overly generous.
They also have a 5% vacancy built in on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up.
I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I will.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, no, there you go. I'm sorry.
I'll motion to confirm the county's assessment at $134,006,500.
Okay, we have a motion. And Mary Hogan, is that you?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, is a second. All in favor to confirm the county?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's 6-1 without Mr. Lawson. The county is confirmed at $134,006,500. Okay. Moving now to the original first case on the agenda, Economic Unit 170040H at 1533 Clarendon Boulevard. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes.
Okay, this is Courtyard Rosslyn Marriott. It's located at 1533 Clarendon Boulevard in Rosslyn. The property is a select service hotel that opened for business in 1990 with 162 rooms. There is an on-site bistro cafe. The 2020 assessed value of $39,545,700 is actually a 33% increase over the final tax year 2019 assessed value of $29,730,400. If you turn to page 5, you'll again see a side-by-side presentation of our analysis in the counties. We utilize the actual calendar year I&E analysis. I&E. The gross potential of the actual 2019 income of $7.8 million for room and board, $472,975 for food and beverage, and $295,286 for miscellaneous income. The county's overstating the total gross potential of this 30-year-old building at $8.7 million, We provided a snapshot of 3 years worth of gross potential income, and the subject has never had a high as 8.7 million in the past 3 years. That's shown on page 4, and the full INEs are included in the addenda. When you go to the expense category, the actual expenses for calendar year 2019 were 64%. The county is underestimating the expenses at 58%. Replacement reserves has historically been reported at 6%, dating back to 2014. The assessor is estimating a replacement reserve of 3.9%, which is underestimating the actual replacement reserves, which were 514,645 as opposed to 341,798 used by the county. We agree with the county's cap rate of 8.33%. A deduction of personal property was applied of the same as the county's of 539,511. This resulted in an estimate of value of 30,305,600. We also provided deductions for business enterprise value. If you were to recognize the business value and intangible assets, because a hotel, after all, is a business operating property, the NOI doesn't just include the real property. Further adjustments would need to be considered. We did take that deduction of a return on and of FF&E, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, a return on the SPIP, which is knowledgeable workforce, and then the brand premium, which is like you would go to a Marriott before you'd go to Bubba's Motel. Taking the business enterprise value consideration, that would develop a value of 26,970,000. Just wanted to also mention again that 33% increase year over year seems outrageous and not market derived. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just to start on the first note, I'm not sure if Ms. Ross is referring to a different properties 2019 assessment, but last year's assessment was actually 35,076,400. So it's still an increase, but it's reasonable considering the property's growth year over year. We'd note that room revenue increased 6.3% in 2019, and even with a drop in food and beverage revenue and miscellaneous revenue, the total revenue is up 3.5%. And that's the third year in a row that that's been achieved. In that same sense, operating expenses are actually down 4.9% in 2019. We did note there's a 3-year operating expense average of 57.2%. We'll note that the county is at 58%. I apologize, this is in reference to the summary page 3 in your packet. Net operating income is up almost 17.9% in 2019. When we look at the projections made by the county before we received the 2019 INE, we'll see that we did in fact overproject total revenue by 175,000. We also overprojected operating expenses by over 400,000. We underprojected FF&E by approximately 172,000, but that also led to an underprojection of the net operating income by over 53,000. Given that we underprojected on the grossly underprojected on operating expenses, and of course underprojected on a net operating income that actually increased by almost 18%. We do believe the county should be confirmed at 39,545,700. For what it's worth, we did test the new information, as you can see in column F, but that also led to a projection that was under projecting the net operating income. And in fact, the difference was some 300,000 and change from our January 1st projection. So we do believe that the column D should be confirmed, which again is a value of 39,545,700. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to both of you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
This is for the applicant. Your argument about business enterprise, how do you value that? For example, you could have a building owned by a pharmacy, Preston's
Pharmacy.
Pharmacy.
I can't hear you.
Can you all hear me?
I can hear now.
If you have a building occupied by, say, a pharmacy, Miss Preston's Pharmacy, wouldn't some of that be business enterprise because of Mr. Preston's, he no longer owns it, but Mr. Preston's reputation in the community? But how do you value that? How do you value what percent of business is attributable to this and what percent is, just the business that's being conducted? I don't see how you make this work. Can you tell me how this can work?
Well, I understand after I put my presentation together that Arlington County doesn't really consider the business value, but if you just look at the pro forma, we're asking for $30,305,600 as opposed to $39,545,700, which is what the assessment is currently.
But how'd you get that figure?
The 30,000, just if you go to page 5, before any of the business value, just look at the income and expense. We're at 30 million. The county's at 39.
Right, but how do you get 9 million as the value of the quote business enterprise?
It's a return on and of, it's a calculation. And I'm asking the board to consider the actuals and without the business enterprise.
Okay.
And the actuals support a value of 30.
I guess.
I did mention the business value. I put that in my presentation, but I found out that Arlington County doesn't consider that. So I'm just asking for you to look at the actuals, and the actual support a value of 30,305,000, not 39,545,700.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Matzkin.
For the appellant, one quick question. The amount on line, well, it's total operating expenses in column G is more than 10% higher.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you again.
Can everybody else hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean,
You just
I know.
came back in now.
Okay, I'll just move up closer. On column G, total operating expenses, the absolute dollar amount, I don't believe so much in percentages. The absolute dollar amount is more than 10% higher than any expenses in the last some years that this property has occurred. Can you provide a rationale of that significant jump given how fairly stable they were in the last couple of years?
No other other than the age of the property. It's 30 years old. It's nearing the end of its economic life that it'll have more expenses.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Hoffman. Your microphone isn't on, Mr. Hoffman.
Sorry about that. I'll ask the county. 2019, it's kind of like a nice increase in NOI over 17, 18. Was there any reason you could figure out why that, they got that boost in NOI? Is that?
No, I mean, it's essentially a relationship between the revenue and the operating expenses. If you kind of follow along with the summary sheet, you'll see that the operating expenses jumped by 170,000 or so, 140,000, and yet the income only went up 20,000. So I think it was an example, again, if you're looking from 16 through 19, that the property's NOI actually increased in 16, 17, and 19. And the dip you saw in 18 was more a reflection of a tightening of the relationship between operating expenses and the revenue that was incurred. Okay. There was a larger jump in revenue in 19 and the expenses went down. I think you saw a larger increase in the NOI in 19 than you would have in 18.
Okay. Yeah, if I can follow up and ask the appellant, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My experience, usually operating expenses only go one way over time, but it looks like they went down significantly in 2019. Is there any explanation for that? That do they put in thermostats in the rooms? Is there something that's
Didn't hear the ending of that. I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry.
I didn't hear the ending of. Oh,
Why did the
Hello?
operating expenses go down in 2019?
I do not know. I'm sorry. I just lost electricity. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. She doesn't know.
I don't have the information in front of me. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
But it's
Okay.
but again, the expenses were never as low as what the county is.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin?
For the county, one last question. In column F, in the test, this is room revenue went up relatively significantly. There was a bump in 2019 over the prior 3 years of a significant amount, but then you bumped it up noticeably above that in your test. What was the rationale for that, please?
Well, respect, Mr. Metzkin, actually, we only bumped it projected 1%, 1.06%. So, yeah, it's fairly modest. Again, it's a reflection. Again, if you're looking at a snapshot from 16 through 19, the room revenue increased in 17. It did see a dip in 18, but again, it increased by over 6% in 19. Yeah. Given that 3 out of those 4 years, there's an increase, so we see no reason to believe that there wouldn't be an increase in 20. And again, project low just to stay on the conservative side.
Thank you. Normal projection. Thank you.
Okay, with no further questions, Mr. Cheekas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Again, given that we underprojected on revenue, but overprojected grossly on, overprojected on revenue, but also again, grossly overprojected on operating expenses, which led to an underprojection of the achievable net operating income that again climbed by almost 18%. We do believe that the county should be confirmed at $39,545,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, I don't think there's that this property is being assessed as a 30-year-old property. It's being assessed more like a 4 or 5-star property. In my initial package that I provided the competitive set. When I was reviewing this yesterday, 2 of the competitive set actually are being demolished because they're older. The subject's actually being assessed more like the Hilton Garden, which is a 4-star hotel and is only 18 years old, not 30 years old. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. Mr. Huffman.
I mean, I did a shorthand. I'm a little nervous about the jump in 19. It seems like kind of an odd data point. So I just did a 3-year average on NOI 17, 18, and 19. And I come out with something slightly lower than what the county had, but I think that the test is pretty good too, as far as kind of smoothing out those data points. So I'm interested in what everybody else thinks.
Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I just have one question for the applicant. Ms. Ross, what value do you have for last year on this property? Because you mentioned twice that it was a 33% increase.
We're actually not in questions any longer.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Forget that then. I'll save my comment for the end.
Okay, we're in the end, Mr. Penaranda. You can make your comments now.
Based on the numbers on this property also, I'm okay with the county. I don't see where anything was excessive. I think the expenses that were provided or that were given were more than a little bit more generous than they should have been, but I'm okay with it. I don't see where we can make any change or adjustment.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin?
I thought the test was pretty good. It was real good. I thought the original column D was good. The test is better. And it comes up with over a 12% increase from 2019 to 2020. And that doesn't makes sense to me, based on what we've seen other hotels. I don't want to get in that it's 30 years old or 3 years old, but that seems like quite a big jump. And so I'm going to, while we're discussing, I'm still going to look for some number that perhaps is out of whack that created that.
Yeah, Ken, if you use my approach of just taking a 3-year average on the NOI, it's 36,582,900. So it's still an increase over 19, but it's not 12%. It's a lot less.
And Mr. Huffman, is your 3-year 2017, 18, and 19?
Yeah, I didn't look at 16 because
Okay.
I'll only look at the 3 years.
Yeah, that makes me feel that's objective, reasonable calculation that derives a bottom line number that is more realistic, I think, based on our experience of hotels in the last increases this year.
Yeah, it's a 4.3% increase over last year.
Okay, what do other folks think? Mr. Lawson?
I'm kind of with Greg. That the applicant made the point that this is comparable to a newer and a higher rated hotel, and that 2 of them that have a comparable age have been raised. I remember when this went up, so I've been around for a while. So I would be willing to support Greg's proposal.
Okay. Mr. Yates?
Well, I see operating expenses I'm okay with. I think revenue's a little pushed on the county side, but given the history, I'm not totally behind. Not far, but not totally behind the county's numbers. So I'm open.
Greg, what was your number?
36,582,900, and that's the after the deducting the value of personal property.
Yeah, I can also support that. I think it's an increase over last year, which, I think there should be. Not quite, to the county test. I think that's a little aggressive. But
Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that too.
Okay, I believe Mr. Huffman, you have a quorum.
All right, I'll motion to reduce the value based on a 3-year average NOI, net of personal property deduction. It'll be 36,582,900.
Second.
Okay, motion is second by Mary Hogan. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so it is 5-2, and that is without Mr. Yates.
I voted yes.
Oh, you voted yes?
Yes.
Okay, so the nays are just the one, Mr. Penaranda?
Right.
Okay, 6-1 then, without Mr. Penaranda. That the assessment is reduced to 36,582,900, and that is after the deduction of the personal property. Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay. Mr. Warren, I believe I saw him. Yes. Okay, so the next case on the agenda is Economic Unit 3501102H 1700 Richmond Highway. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about your property.
Okay, you can hear me all right?
We can, sir. We can, sir, yes.
Okay, got it. Just want to make sure. Okay, so if you turn to page, it's a pretty straightforward case. Page 3 of our analysis would be page 48 of 78 is our summary of facts. This is the Marriott Crystal Gateway located at 1700 Richmond Highway. It is comprised of 2 individual tax parcels ending 007 and 00. It is currently assessed at, or original assessment was 159,436,600. Last year, that was went down slightly from last year's final value of 159,871. A revision was made at the first level by the county to 149,288,700, and our initial asking value for this property was 114,892,000. This property was originally built in 1982. It is a full service hotel in Crystal City, one building and 18 stories. The property is in very close proximity, walking distance to the Crystal City Metro Station. Really what we're here to talk about is initially this was an issue with operating expenses and revenue estimates in the county's initial assessment. Now, if you turn to page, the hotel income and expense summary sheet on, I guess that's page 3 of the county's analysis. The operating expenses for this property have averaged around 73.5% or 73.75% over the last 2 years from 2018. Most recently in 2019 reported 73.68%. The revised value or test column provided by the county did take into consideration of that fact, raising it from 72% to 73.5%. However, in doing that, they also increased their revenue estimate in their test column. So you'll see in column D, their original test column, they were estimating total revenue of $57,886,543. The last 4 years of income reported at the property has been in 2016, 54.8, 58.4 in 2017, 56.16 in 2018, and then most recently 57,265,875. So obviously what was most recently reported was around 600,000 below the original revenue estimate by the county. In their revision in their test column, they subsequently increased that estimate to 58,130,278. Now, if you just go to the most recent 3-year average of this, if you take 2017 to most recently 2019, a total revenue estimate average would be 57,282,615, which is basically right on what was reported in 2019. And it drops even further, that average, if you take it back another year to 56,670,676. So, based on the last couple of years, this property has been downward trending in revenue. That's going to obviously continue given the current environment we're in now, and especially with the hospitality market basically taking the brunt of this COVID and the impact of that. Again, you can expect a downward trend the following year. So we believe that the revision column or the test column, although appropriate for estimating the most recent operating history for the expenses, we don't feel the increase from the original revenue estimate from 57,886 to 58,130 up to 58,130 was justified. It should have not been increased. It should have been decreased, and that I don't think there's any justification for increasing that revenue estimate in the test column. So that's basically it. We're in agreement basically on the adjustment that was made to the operating expenses, but disagreement given the operating history and then the downward trend that we're going to and have been experiencing the last few years and will continue to experience the coming year with regard to the total revenue estimate that's being applied in the test column. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas?
Yes, ma'am. Unlike the last property, we just don't see a downward trend. And that's indicative of the idea that even though occupancy ticked down 0.3%, so 0.3%, in 2019, the average daily rate increased by $7.72, with the subsequent increase in revenue per available room by over $5.41 in 2019. And you can basically see that again on page 3 of the summary sheet, 16, 17, 18, 19. Although again, there was a slight dip in occupancy, it's still roughly around 78%. And yet the average daily rate has increased 3 out of those 4 years. And again, with a subsequent increase in the revenue per available room. We saw the property had a room revenue increase in 3.7% in 2019. And again, even though there was a decrease in food and beverage and miscellaneous revenue, total revenue increased by 2% in 2019. There was an increase in operating expense by approximately 1.3% in 2019, but we did note again a 3-year average of 72.5%, with the county at 73.5%. So as Mr. Warren noted, we did in fact recognize that increase and made adjustment in column F to reflect that, and even more generous than what was reported in the year 2019. As you can see in the comments section, and as we've talked about previous in regards to the applicability or using capital improvements as an expense, 2018 and 2017, the property spent near $32 million essentially on what you could call a gut job in the hotel industry, and that there's renovations to the guest rooms, bathrooms, conference rooms, lobby, HVAC, sprinkler system, door locks, and the building exterior, even to the property's porte cochere, which is essentially the driveway, the large colonnaded driveway where guests arrive. So that would account for the downturn in 2018. I think Mr. Hoffman was asking a previous case about why there might be an increase or decrease year over year. You can see that the rooms that were affected as far as not being necessarily available for rent caused a decrease in room revenue. And that was the only time out of the last 4 years in which case that happened. There was a downturn subsequent to the net operating income because even though revenues were down, expenses were actually up. Which is usually converse. There should be some sort of causal relationship between those two. But regardless, you can see that after they spent that money on capital improvements, they got rewarded. So that even though their occupancy went down, their room revenues went up. They were able to achieve that because, again, the hotel had been freshened and more presentable and attractive to the buyers who are looking for a place to stay. Hence, you see an increase in the net operating income, 4.2% in 2019. When we look at our test, you can see that the county did overproject total revenues, but again, made a modest increase as far as room projections of 1.5%. This is well less than half of what the increase was in 2019, again, on the conservative side, but still allowing for the growth that's going to happen when you have a hotel that's spent $32 million on refurbishments, if you will. We did overproject operating expenses by $532,000 or 1.3%. We also overprojected on the FF&E by about $43,000, and it led to an overprojection on the net operating income by 2.4%. But again, almost half of what was achieved in 2019's growth at 4.2%. Given the upward trajectory of the property, given the $32 million spent on the property as far as refreshing near every aspect of its property, we do believe that the county's revision of $149,288,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Lawson.
Yes, on column G, right above NOI, there's 2476621. What is that?
Is that a question for?
That's for the.
Yeah, for the applicant. I'm sorry.
It's in red.
It's most likely, and then when we refer back to the 2476621. So
yeah.
Our $140,892,000 requested value initially. That's based on an imputed franchise fee of 4%, or excuse me, of 6.4%, which is listed in the county's assessment guidelines for hotels. Their hotel guidelines for hotels for full service is 6.4%. So again, if you're going to apply this methodology uniformly for all hotels that that are reporting franchise fees, then you should do it also for properties that are not reporting franchise fees.
Let me ask, is it a one-time charge? Is it a yearly charge? What's the deal on it?
It would
Again,
be,
that's for the applicant, sir?
Yeah, for the applicant.
it would be an annual charge if there was a franchise fee agreement, and the owner can agree to go with an independent management company and be subject to a franchise fee if they wanted to continue to use the brand name of the hotel. So through Marriott.
It seems to me that the difference between the county and you is totally that figure. And that seems like an enormous yearly charge for a franchise fee.
So I will say,
If the county may respond, Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, either one.
Well, essentially, we do not support that adjustment for the primary reason, as both Mr. Warren and you are suggesting, is that this is not a expense that's been incurred by the owner. It's been imputed by the appellant. And to note specifically, when the guidelines mention franchise fees, as is noted, that's included in total expenses. So in other words, that's a breakdown, that's a metric, if you will, showing that of the total expenses of I&Es that we receive of properties that pay franchise fees, that's 6.4% of the total expenses. So we believe to impute that expense line would be the same thing as the county imputing an income line that's not attributable to revenue source. What we're listing in years 16, 17, 18, and 19 are expenses that are incurred by the property, not ones that are imputed or made up by the appellant.
and just I'll onto that, and the reason we do impute that is because any purchase of the property could be subjected and put this under a franchise, and that would come into consideration of their fair market price for the property. Now, given that, what we did say initially is that, given the actual historical operating costs of the property, we were in agreement with the adjustment that was made to the county's test column. However, what we weren't in agreement with is the adjustment. So, what I if you look at the direct cap and the NOI that you get down to of 12,209,157, that does not include the
You're breaking up. I can't hear you.
Yeah, can anyone else hear him?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
I can hear you now.
So
Totally missed the last 2 minutes.
the average revenue, the average revenue that we're seeing in the 2019 direct cap is right in line with the 3-year average. The NOI that you're seeing from that with the operating expenses that was reported in 2019 obviously doesn't have.
You're breaking up again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're also off the question.
Yeah. Okay, moving back to other questions from board members. No? Oh, Mr. Matzkin.
I'm sorry, but we didn't get any kind of, I didn't get any kind of input on, Barnes asked a question I was going to ask for the same reason. And that's the difference between the appellant and the department. And what I understand is that, and again, it's breaking up, so I don't know exactly what the appellant said, but it seems that the franchisor is charging $2.5 million a year to use the name. Now, there's obvious real value to the use of the name and the accoutrements that go along with that brand. And it doesn't seem to have appeared in years past, that figure. So I'm understanding that now, and it seems to me that this is relevant to the operation of the property. Without it, revenues would probably be less and all kinds of different stuff would happen. So I'm trying to form a question. So I guess to the department, are you saying the franchise fees are just distributed within the normal operating expenses under expenses in your various columns. And this is in essence double counting. And then I'll ask a similar question to the appellant. Hopefully I'll be able to hear an answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Metzgen, for clarity. I won't put words in Mr. Warren's mouth, but to be clear, that franchise fee that's being imputed is not being incurred by the owner of this property. There is a franchise fee line listed on the expenses of the hotel I&E, and that's line number 25, E25. That's under the management subtotal, because there are properties that do in fact incur franchise fees, but those are ones that have a franchise fee agreement in place with the flag. Essentially, by including that imputation of almost 2.5 million, it would essentially be suggesting that the total operating expenses were over $45 million, which has never been incurred by this property. So what we were trying to make clear was that it's simply a metric. That's how the 6.4% was used by Mr. Warren, is that the guidelines suggest that, again, of the properties that turn in income and expense forms, 6.4% of total expenses is franchise fee. But again, this property does not incur that expense, so it should not be allowed as a expense line item.
Love to hear Mr. Warren's explanation.
Okay, Mr. Warren, we'd love to hear you respond to that. Can you turn your camera on, Mr. Warren?
I thought it was on.
He's
Sorry.
I don't see
him.
Yeah, I don't see him either.
It says it's on.
Okay.
I'll turn it off and turn it back on.
All right. Go ahead and speak, and maybe you'll pop up.
Okay. I'm sorry. And hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
In just very response, it is our belief that if you're going to include a franchise fee for in your methodology and in your guidelines, you should take it for all properties to uniformly assess that property. Now, what we are conceding and what I was trying to explain, and maybe did a very poor job of it initially, was given the actual historical operating costs that have been reported at the subject property, we are in agreement with the county's Texas column for the 73.5% expense ratio applied. What we are not in agreement with is the revenue adjustment. I think a perfect indicator of what the value should be.
Okay, Mr. Warren, the question is about the franchise fee. So you can do your wrap up on the other items during your wrap up. Do you have anything else to say about the franchise fee?
No, just that we are in belief that it should be, but we're conceding that fact, and the test on is basically just a revenue argument now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Other
good.
questions from board members?
No.
Mr. Gates.
Just a minor one. Why, to the appellant, it doesn't seem to have been reflected on prior years? Is something you just decided this year to try to suggest it should be there?
This is a property that we're just reviewing on behalf of the owner for the first year.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, any final questions? No, with that said, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just in sort of following on the tail end of that argument, Mr. Warren would like the board to recognize the guideline metric of 6.4% for franchise fees, but the guideline for full service hotels also lists total expenses at 69.7%. So it seems to be picking and choosing where the metrics apply and benefit the owner. The county recognizes that the expenses at the property are well above 69.7%. Hence, we look at the actual operating history of the property. If we're looking at the actual operating history of the property, this franchise fee does not exist, as it's not an expense that's incurred by the property. Given that we did look again at the 2019's newly received information, we do believe that our over projections on operating expenses and FF&E allowed for a modest increase projection of net operating income of 2.4%, well in line with the property that's been heavily rehabilitated at $32 million of capital improvements. We do believe that the revision of $149,288,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes. So again, to wrap up, we are in agreement with the county's adjustment for operating expenses. However, we are in disagreement over their upward adjustment upon receiving the 2019 financials for overall revenue. The 3-year average for reported revenue from 17 to 19, $7,282,615. That the 4-year average is even lower, 56,677,446. That original revenue estimate of the county was increased subsequently upon receiving the 19 income, which was $600,000 lower than the original estimate of revenue. It was increased to $1,130,278. That 3-year average of 57,282 is very much in line with what was reported in 19. And so we feel that at the very least, that revenue estimate in the test column should not have increased and should be right around the most recent 2019 reported that have happened and occurred in this area, but probably the most relevant. This property right now is currently assessed at $213,000 a room. The Hyatt Centric sold for $73 million or $185,000 in November of 19. I think that's the most comparable comp to this property.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board. I'll start. I mean, from a standpoint of adding that on this year, from a standpoint of equalization, it's built into the actual operating expenses, and I would not feel comfortable taking a deduction for it for this property because I think it would take it out of equalization with all the other properties. I mean, if you add that back into the appellant's number, he's within $3,000 of the 2019 reported INE. You know, I look at what the county did, and they may be slightly high based on the average, but I think the county test is a good number. When I look at the number that the appellant's asking for, I think it's absolutely unreasonable that the value would have dropped that much. So I'm open to what other people have to say, but that's kind of where I'm sitting. Other folks? Mr. Lawson. Mr. Lawson?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you had called on. You know, there has to be a management fee. And I tinkered around on the internet looking at, you know, if I open a Marriott hotel, you know, what is my franchise fee? And I mean, there has to be one somewhere. And I'm just wondering if it isn't taken somewhere else, such as in, you know, the management, maybe it's an incentive fee. I don't know. There has to be one. And so I guess in the absence of submitting it on the part of the, you know, on the expense sheet, I've got to go with Mary and consider what the county's done as being okay.
Yeah, Barnes.
Mr. Hoffman.
I was looking in there too on the income and expense that was submitted by Ashford, and there's a pretty large under management. You have a base fee and an incentive fee, and that number is huge. So I mean, that's on top of management salaries and everything like that. This is just fee. So I think buried in there somewhere is probably a franchise fee.
That's
right, and this would not be unique just to Marriott.
Yeah,
everybody's got this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the INE which Ashford prepared. I think that the their tax agent has got a different story, but this is the INE from the owner.
It's probably there, just not listed on the line franchise fee.
That's correct. Yeah. So,
Mr. Yates.
I'm sorry. We've talked about it, but I do see the counties. I'm totally in line with what the counties has. I hear the points by the appellant, and even on the revenue, but I think their logic in coming up with where they did on the revenue is good too.
Okay, any other discussion? No, then, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, well, I'm okay with the county's revision on the assessment. I think using 1 year specifically and trying to pick, 2019 as a basis to try to lower the value, I don't think it's appropriate. By using the same rationale that the board used in the previous case, doing an average of NOIs for the past 3 years, the average comes to 12,926,000 on the NOI, which is higher than what the county is using. I'm not in favor of doing an average on the final NOI, but if you use the same rationale, then you'll be a lot higher than this. So I'm okay with the county's revision.
Okay. All right, then I will make a motion to accept the county's revised number of 149,288,700.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Yates. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number has been confirmed at 149,288,700. Okay, before we take a break, Mr. Warren, I'm not sure why your camera doesn't work, but I'd like to see during the 5 minutes if you could get it to work. Ms. Torres, I think that we need to let appellants know moving forward. This meeting is generally and always has been a meeting that's held in person, so their cameras need to work. Part of the presentation is looking at them, hearing them, looking at body language, and it's difficult when you've just got, a circle up there with a imaginary person. So moving forward, I'd like to see all of the appellants visual on the screen when they're presenting. So it is 10:16. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll be back and hear the final 2 cases. Thank you.
Chris, did you say you could see me?
I can. Yeah,
Okay.
I can see.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't see you, Blake, at all. It says it has your initials, BW.
I see him.
That's
Yeah,
why.
he's got a large map
Yeah.
in his background.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's why when I send out the BOE, I send a note that says that you probably need to go by the invitation and log in and see how it works, to make sure the camera works for that day.
But in other words, it's just strange that I can see him.
I can't see him either.
Yeah, I don't see him at all. Maybe it's whatever he's using.
Yeah, maybe he
and
needs
there's
to
a
restart.
703. Is he?
I
Are
don't-
you
He's
two
wearing-
different
He's wearing a
connections?
striped polo shirt.
I don't
Is
see.
No, it's
That's
it's
strange.
his full.
Is he on 2 different connections?
I called in with my phone, so the connection is through my phone.
So the
What you're hearing?
577 is you as well?
But I saw when he clicked off and then his picture became his initials and then he clicked back on, but it was the same picture I saw before. Like right now, he just clicked off and now he's back on.
Everyone, let me remind you, I'm still recording. I cannot stop the recording.
Yeah,
Okay?
we see the red dot.
Okay. Just in case.
All right.
Log out. I'm gonna try and log back in.
Sir.
Rosa?
She probably stepped away.
Okay, I'm just in a queue, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Mark, are you back? Ken?
Yes, I'm back.
Mark is back? Okay. Jose?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mary Hogan is back. So I'm waiting on Ken and Greg. Oh, I see Greg.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yep, I got you. Okay, and there's Ken. Okay, we've got everybody back on here.
Mary, this is Blake. I'm waiting in the queue. I think I need to be accepted to the meeting.
I'm sorry?
For the video, I'm in a queue. It says we've let people in the meeting.
Okay, Rosa, can you let Mr. Warren in? We want to see his smiling face.
Hopefully it works.
No, I mean, and yesterday somebody said, oh, I can't be on for security reasons. Really? Go find another corner to, turn the camera on.
Can you see me?
Again.
Not yet.
Man.
So, something is weird, Mary. I can see him. I saw him in the earlier cases. I don't know why y'all can't see him. But he's definitive.
And any of the board members see him?
No, I can't.
No, I can't.
I'll go back. We just upgraded our software to Microsoft Teams too, so it might be something to do with our IT moving forward. So we'll get that fixed.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, moving along to the fourth case on the agenda, RPC 36016-004, 1800 Richmond Highway. This is the AVR Bristol City Hotel. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Yeah, so this property is actually located directly to the south of the last property we spoke about, the Crystal Gateway. That's West Bristol City at 1800 Jefferson Davis Highway. One tax parcel that comprises the current 2020 assessment of $70,905,100. That was subsequently revised by the county to $69,045,000. Our value of $40,570,000. The business enterprise approach. I know there's been precedent in prior years that that is an unacceptable methodology, and that the county has not considered that appropriate. Given that fact, we're willing to concede that fact, and based off of the direct cap value from 2019, would get you to a value of $68,407,200. So that's what we're requesting from the board today. This is an older hotel as well. It's originally built in 1984. It's full service, 220 total rooms. It has one dining option and a bar. It also has a fitness studio and outdoor swimming pool meeting space. If you turn back to page 3 of the county's recommendations to the board, you'll see the hotel income and expense summary. The initial issues that we brought forth with our first level appeal was with regard to the county's room and food and beverage revenue estimates for the original 2020 assessment, the operating expenses. So following that revision, we're in agreement with the revision made to revenue. However, the county has adjusted now total operating expenses to fall below what was reported in 2019. So their original assessment had an estimate of $9.6 million operating expenses, which was adjusted down to $8,758,696 in their test column, and what was actually reported in 2019 was $8,870,172. So about $120,000 below what was actually reported. This property has seen subsequent drop in occupancy, which we've seen really across the board in Arlington. The last property we discussed about might be the lone exception. It's been pretty stable. However, again, that's going to continue next year. I know the county has recently sent out income and expense questionnaires detailing and asking for the impact of COVID, which I think is really good. And what you're going to see here is this particular property. Last time that we had checked, I don't have month numbers from July, but revenue was down then from budget. So this is a property that before COVID was experiencing downward trend in occupancy, and certainly you're going to see that impact the following year as well. Again, we're asking for a small adjustment to operating expenses in the county's test column now. And given that, if you look at it on a direct 2019, we put the value at $68,407,200 or $311,000 a room. And that's all we have today.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Chicas.
Yes, ma'am. So again, sort of echoing a bit of Mr. Warren's comments and what we've seen in previous hotels, the occupancy did in fact tick down almost 3.3% in 2019. But again, even with that downturn, the average daily rate increased by over $9. Revenue increased by almost $2 in 2019. So they're actually doing better with less, if you will. Room revenue was up 2.2%, but food and beverage and miscellaneous revenue were down, which actually caused a decrease year over year, 0.4%, so 0.4% decrease from 2018. So fairly stabilized 18 to 19. Operating expenses also dropped. Again, there's usually a causal relationship between operating expenses and revenue that's achieved. So there was an expectation that operating expenses would be down. They were down 2.7% in 2019. We noted a 3-year average, 17, 18, 19, with an operating expense average of 56.7%. And you'll note in our revision column, the county's at 58%, so well above the 3-year average. Regardless of all of the downturns in food and beverage and miscellaneous revenue and total revenue, because again, the operating expenses dropped at a rate faster than the revenue, the operating income is actually up 4.5% in 2019. Given that we were a bit overzealous on our projections previous to receiving the 2019 income and expense questionnaire, we did make a revision, as you can see in column F. In that revision, we underprojected total revenue by 0.6%. kind of echoing the downturn in 18 to 19. We did underproject operating expenses by 1.3%, but again, that follows that the operating expenses have gone down in 19. So again, about half of what occurred in 2019, but still, again, well above the 3-year average of 56.7%, with the county at 58%. We underprojected FF&E and overprojected net operating income by 0.3%. So again, a very modest increase projection of 0.3% after a increase of 4.5% at the property. Given these changes to the projections made by the county, we do believe that the revision should be confirmed at $69,045,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? I have a question I'll just ask Mr. Chikas. Your argument, and we hear this on both sides, from both sides, and I tend to always lean towards the number and not the percentage. You talked about that your 58% was below the 59 and 58, what the average was for the past 3 years on expenses. However, it's because it's a percentage, it's really is the number in line, and the number doesn't seem to be in line.
That's correct. But again, I think without being argumentative, the percentage is accurate because, again, it's a percentage of revenue. So if you're doing that same math of the averages of expenses, you'll note that the average for income is about $740,000 higher than what we projected. So I think we're being fair on both sides in the fact that we're well under the average of revenue, and we're actually just slightly below the average of expenses, but keeping both in sort of line with what's going on at the property, looking at trends, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
For the county, we have comment, agent makes deduction for return on of FF&E and return on of SPIP. What do those abbreviations stand for?
They're the appellant's marks, but from previous history in dealing with the appellant's use of these numbers, return on of FF&E is just that, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, and I believe SPIP stands for staff processes in place. In other words, it's a reflection of the business enterprise valuation, but it's, sort of more of a theory, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up then?
Yes, ma'am. So again, in reflection of the very modest downturn in revenue and operating expenses in year 19, we did modify our projection for the year 2020. Given again that we underprojected revenue in accordance with underprojecting operating expenses, we do believe that our very modest projection for increase in net operating income of 0.3% is well in line with the increase of over 4.5% in year 2019. So we do believe the county should be confirmed at $69,045,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chikas. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes. Again, this property has experienced a downward trend over the last 3 years in occupancy pretty substantially, from 88% in 17, 85%, 18, 43% in 2019. Revenue subsequently has fallen as well and will continue to fall from 17 million to 15.2 to 15.26 to 15.2. Again, we think the adjustment made to the revenue was appropriate in the county's test column. However, their adjustment to operating expenses now puts the operating expenses roughly $120,000 below what was actually reported most recently in 2019. Again, given those factors, I think we believe an adjustment should be made to the total operating expenses to the 2020 assessment value. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both gentlemen. Okay, it's just among the board. I mean, I'll start based on what I had asked Mr. Chikas. I did have some pause initially about the operating expenses. I think when you look at percentages, they don't always tell you a true case. So I went ahead and did my own test and increased the expenses to 59%. However, when I bring it down and, after subtracting for the personal property, I end up lower than last year's, and I don't think that's in fact the case. So, now I'm kind of leaning more towards the test and think that that is reasonable. I mean, if the NOI continues to drop, I mean, the problem is it seems to be up and down, up and down. It's pretty close to the 2019 reported numbers. So my vote would be, I would be all right with the revision. What's everybody else think?
I agree with the revision. I see the county's logic in what they're doing. It's, I can't fault it.
Other folks?
Well, I did the same as you did, except I didn't go to 59%. I just increased the expenses to 58.5, which is, not much, but that 0.5% does lower the value a little bit lower than what the appellant is requesting. He drops it to 68,105, 900. But it is a very minor decrease. But I could go either way.
Yeah. What's everybody else think? Ms. Hogan?
I think I could go with Jose's.
Okay, Mr. Lawson?
I could go with Jose.
Okay. Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'll go with it. The only thing that stands out to me, and there could be reasons for this, is just because we saw the last case and it's like Marriott on the block next door is $213,000 a key, and for some reason this one is $314,000 a key. So, room rates, ADR is in line, expenses are way different. And so I guess it's just comes down to the operation of the hotel and where the different income streams are coming from and what the costs are. So it's a little, my shorthand check, I don't see why it's that far off, but from a income approach, I think the logic is fine. So I could go with Jose.
Okay. All right, Mr. Penaranda, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll move that we reduce the assessment to 68,105,900, and that's based on increasing the expenses to 58.5% on the revision.
All right, and I will second that. Motion and second by Mary Dooley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll go with aye. I just don't see the.
Okay, it's unanimous. The assessments reduced to 68,105,900 based on increasing expenses to 58.5. Okay, thank you, Mr. Warren.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you, guys. Get my video fixed next week.
Thank you. That would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, and I saw Mr. Steinhauser. Yes,
Good morning.
Yes, he's there. Good morning.
Can everybody see me today?
I can't. Where are you?
Yes. I see you, Grant.
You can?
I
Okay.
cannot.
I can.
I can.
No.
I see you, Grant.
All right.
Last week I had a suit on and everything.
There we go.
Nobody could see me.
I can see you now. Okay. All right. The last case of the day is RPC 34027-563, 2850 Potomac Avenue, the residence in Arlington Capitol View. So, Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about your property.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, the property is the residence in Capitol View. It's a 325 key hotel, and it was built, I believe, 2011. I think I noted our objections sort of to the county's stance towards COVID-19 and just in general to hotels this year. That being said, I've seen the assessor's revision, and I think he's done a pretty good job. Sort of re-estimating the income and expenses there. We think the cap rate should be higher for select service, or I guess this is residence suites, but it's sort of the same thing. And I'm aware that it's not going to be changed at this hearing. So all that being said, I think my objections have been noted, but I appreciate Mr. Chikas's work here, and I think the revision, is pretty good for the purpose of this hearing. Thanks.
All righty. Mr. Chikas, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, if there's agreement, that's obviously what we're looking for, is a confirmation of the value of 75,8021. So if we're all in favor of that.
Okay. Any questions from any board members? Mr. Lawson. Turn your microphone on, please.
I'm sorry, I clicked, but it didn't turn the microphone on. For the purpose of this hearing, explain what that meant.
We're reserving our right to file to court if needed.
Is it because we aren't willing to change cap rates?
That one of many reasons, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board members?
No.
I would assume that we don't need a wrap up from either party, from the board members?
No.
All right. Well, then with no discussion, then I will move to accept the county's revision of the 75,802,100.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second by Mary Hogan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It has been reduced to the county's recommended amount of 75,802,100.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steinhauser. Okay, is any other business from any board members or from the county? All right, then we stand adjourned at 10:42. We'll reconvene next Tuesday, August 11th at 9 a.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.